a stranger with a gun came upon 2 teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. My name is Casey Scott, and if you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did, and that's to give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Dr. Matt, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
So I hear there's a little chaos going on at the Woolley homestead.
More than usual.
You've got puppies.
Yeah, my dog and my son's dog went on a date, and we're irresponsible.
Okay.
And now we have 4 wonderful puppies that are 6 weeks old this week.
And what kind of puppies are they?
Aussie Doodles. One dog is a golden, and they're mini. They're mini golden doodle and a mini Aussie.
You know, all I know is if you put mini in front of any breed, it makes the price of the dog go up exponentially.
Yeah, they're more expensive. They're great, but they're the perfect size for like indoor, outdoor kind of dogs for our family at least.
And so they're running around there, and you were talking about waking up in the morning and having puppies just run around your legs.
It's kind of funny because they'll whine in the morning and they're ready for food and all of that, and normally that sort of stuff would just drive me crazy, but it's so fun because they run around your bare feet and kind of, you know, snuggle up to you while you're getting breakfast for the kids and making school lunches, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie, I'm exhausted.
You're ready for them to leave.
In a way, yes. In a way, no. It's just this weird dilemma I have. I want to keep 1 or 2, but that's not a good idea because we already have 2 dogs. And so I'm gonna miss them.
So now, what would you rather? Let's play Would You Rather.
Oh, I like this one.
Would you rather new baby smell all the time or puppy breath smell all the time?
Well, the problem is I can't smell anything, Casey. Like, my nose doesn't work.
Now, is that like a real thing?
Yeah. It wouldn't be fun to fake.
So, have we talked about this before?
Yeah, thanks. I feel that you know me really well. No, my nose stopped working years ago, and so I very rarely can smell anything. I do remember baby smell, and I do like the baby smell. I don't know what puppy breath smells.
Forget about the puppies. Yeah. So, when eating, does not being able to smell the food, does that affect the taste of the food?
We do blind tests once in a while just to see where my taste buds are at.
Right.
I think definitely it's diminished, but I'm still pretty good to go.
What do I smell like?
Nothing. I can't
smell. Just smell.
You smell like nothing to me.
I smell like Midnight. That's the new cologne that my girlfriend got me for Christmas.
Oh, Midnight.
It's called Midnight.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is that an actual cologne, or is that like an imitation of Jacquard or something?
No, I think it's an actual cologne, but I don't think it's an actual expensive cologne.
I think that's one of the dumbest things to be expensive in the
cologne?
whole world. Absolutely. But that is coming from a guy who can't smell.
But I think now listen, normally, you know, we talked about my Lululemon pants.
Yeah, I'm starting to worry. Lululemon pants
and cologne,
Midnight.
Yeah.
What about Sex Panther? Do you have that cologne?
No.
Okay.
Baby steps. But here's the deal. So my lady likes me in nice things.
Yeah, she does.
But she's also savvy about her money. So she's not going to waste money on an expensive cologne if she knows that daddy ain't going to wear it.
Right.
You know,
does she call you daddy?
No.
We need to have a different conversation. I'm hoping she sticks with C money.
C money. But you know,
I will say, since you guys started dating seriously, your wardrobe has definitely gone up several notches.
Oh yeah, no,
right?
Leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
They're ironed.
I've noticed that wrinkle free.
They're coordinating.
They go together.
Yeah. No,
I'm impressed. She's done well.
She's special.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I can't play Would You Rather about smells, but I am going to miss the puppies. They're a lot of fun.
Do you remember the last thing you smelled?
Well, every once in a while I'll be able to smell something. So earlier this year, I was walking down the stairs at work and a pizza delivery guy from the Pie was walking up. Ooh. And I knew it was a real smell, not a phantom smell, which I do get sometimes, like wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Like I'll come home and I'm like, oh, somebody made cookies, and like I'm the only one there.
Yeah.
You know, but I smelled the Pie pizza before I saw the delivery guy. And then I knew it was but then it lasts like 10 seconds and it's gone. So it's a weird thing.
That is a weird thing.
Yeah.
Even Josh is freaked out by
My brain
this.
is shutting down, probably. Actually, the best I've been told is it's a degenerative olfactory nerve.
But it wasn't from like you shoving Matchbox cars up there or something when
No.
you were a young kid?
No, it's probably inherited. My dad has a similar thing.
Huh.
Yeah. Concussions can do it, too. I've had several of those growing up.
But you didn't do anything sporty as a kid, did you?
Yeah, I did. I played football. I played soccer. What are you talking about? In the room, everybody in the room, raise your hand if you played any college sports.
Does drinking count?
Nope.
Did you play the college sport?
Well, I was on the team. I wouldn't say played. That's a little bit of a stretch.
Soccer?
Football at BYU.
Did you really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Get out.
I practiced. I was a redshirt freshman. They let me go, hold the football and stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Back in the day, it was the year Ty Detmer won the Heisman.
So you played on the same team as Ty Detmer?
Again, play is a little bit of an overstatement.
But you're on the team with Ty Detmer.
Yeah, technically, yeah. I'm not sure that he ever saw me.
I would lead with that every time you meet somebody.
Yeah, and then you have to explain that you're just kind of
No,
a
you don't.
scrubby red
say I was on the team with him, and I'm a doctor.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
I'm gonna be socially popular before I know it.
All right, so it's time to get to the podcast, and the podcast is all about our guests. We invite our guests on to kind of share their story, and, in the infancy stage of this podcast, a lot of my job required me to go out and find people to tell their stories and help them share the story. And now it's become more of me just responding to people reaching out on Facebook and through email saying, hey, look, I've got something I want to share.
Which we're really grateful for, because that kind of indicates to us that we're building this community of people around this idea of recovery from addiction. And so I'm thrilled that we have so many people that reach out.
And Jason and his lovely wife, Lauren, have joined us today. And you've been reaching out to me because your addiction is what?
I have an addiction to pornography and masturbation.
And you've heard our other podcasts where we've kind of shared other people's story in addiction, and you felt like you had something different to offer. And so we're going to get to that a little later in the podcast. But how does your addiction to pornography and masturbation start?
For me, it started in 8th grade. I think going through puberty and not really knowing what was going on, and I didn't feel comfortable talking to parents or anybody about things. My sex education consisted of what they teach you at school in like 5th grade and
maturation assembly.
Maturation.
Yes.
And see, on the flip side of that coin, my sex education was HBO.
I was just going to say HBO. I should have said it.
I mean, it really was.
Yeah, I know.
mean, what I learned and watched on HBO and whatever I could find late night on TV when my parents were asleep.
Right, which is obviously many people's experience, but obviously an unhealthy and inaccurate way to learn about sex. But many of us grew up. That was, like you said, Jason, it's uncomfortable to, as a person going through puberty and first having those experiences of sexual maturation, to talk to anybody about it. At the most, you might talk to a friend, but your friend's the one watching HBO too, getting bad info from his older brother.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, that's
not
tough.
good.
No, it's not good.
So, but let me ask you before we go deeper into Jason's story. I mean, this is probably a common tale of, men all across the country, finding out about sex and hormones and feelings and wondering if they're the only one doing it, because not everyone's talking.
Yeah, it's so personal and it's so new when you're that age, but it's powerful. So it's on your mind a lot. And you kind of want to talk about it, but you're embarrassed to talk about it. And I think the reason that most young people have a hard time finding accurate information and somebody to talk to is how it used to be dealt with in the past. So most of us have heard people talk about having the talk with their parents. Like parents have to have the talk, the birds and the bees, right? But that right there in and of itself starts us off in a bad way, because the implication is mom and dad are going to sit us down and tell us where babies come from, and then that's it. We have the talk, one and done, and we're over with. And of course, that's not the right way to do it. What we do know now is even if, or especially if it makes you feel uncomfortable as a parent, what you need to do is open a dialogue about first maturation. So back to the everybody hated that fifth grade assembly. If you were lucky enough to, your parents didn't go with you, you could sit in the back with the other scrubby kids and kind of make fun of it. But unfortunately, my parents were responsible and took me to it, and so I had to sit there and be embarrassed, right?
Yeah.
But starting with conversations about maturation and your body changes and changing, and then onto sexual development, and that's where a lot of parents, it's uncomfortable to talk to your kids about those sorts of things, but having an ongoing dialogue and conversation about appropriate levels of sexual interest and excitement and contact with other people, talking about how holding hands, when that's appropriate versus other sexual behaviors as people get older. And so having an open dialogue is really the right way to go. But because we just have the idea of the talk, then I think it starts us off looking for more information on our own elsewhere, and that usually means a friend or an HBO or something.
Yeah.
Or nowadays, HBO World,
Yeah.
it's the computer.
The internet.
Right? And so nowadays, any kid who has a question like you and I might have had when we were kids, now they can go Google that question, and they get all sorts of pornographic and misinformation. And
you don't know where you're going to end up.
It's dangerous, and it teaches kids a lot of wrong ideas about sex.
So let's get back to Jason. Do you remember having the talk with your parents?
Yeah, when the night before my wedding night.
Oh, that was a little late.
I got married at 26.
Okay.
And that's when you had the talk.
That's when I had to talk.
Yeah.
But you said you started feeling these feelings when you were much younger than 26.
Yeah, it's like 15 years too late.
And so all the information you got was by your own account, right?
Yeah.
And so when you started to get interested in that, where did that take you?
It took me to, experimenting with my body and just first started looking at women's clothing catalogs, and then it went from there to looking at magazine covers or anything I could get a hold of, like even on TV, just looking for shows that were inappropriate or something a little more sexual.
Yeah. A lot of shows are intended, and commercials like a Victoria's Secret commercial.
Yeah.
Well,
they're intended to be
let's call it what it
sexually
is.
exciting.
Sex sells. I mean,
It does.
Baywatch was a horrible show, but very popular, and it wasn't because of the acting.
It was just the intro, the
Yeah.
slow motion beach running.
Yeah, and the suits, and let's just call it what it is.
Sexy people hanging out. Yep.
But the one thing I notice is that you're a little uncomfortable right now talking about this.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine a much younger you going through this had to be very uncomfortable for yourself to be in your own skin.
It was, and I didn't talk to my parents until a year later in seminary class when we talking about the law of chastity and what's appropriate according to the standards of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he talked about pornography, about what it was, and that's included in this, and that's when I realized, I've been doing this for a year and didn't know it, what I was really doing, what I was looking at and participating in. So I went home and talked to back up. I talked to the teacher, and he's like, whoa, don't talk to me about this. You need to talk to, your parents and see if you need to talk to your bishop or something like that to kind of help you, depending on where you're at. And so I went home and told my mom, and she wasn't all that surprised. She's like, yeah, we realized you were spending a lot of time to yourself in your room.
And we knew you weren't cleaning.
Yeah. And, they didn't... what hit me the most at that time was like, well, why didn't you come talk to me about it? If you kind of saw some signs, it kind of hurt me a little bit at that time. But
do you think it was because they were uncomfortable?
Oh yeah, as I have gotten older and talked to them a little bit more about it, and learned more even just this year of like they have a lot of shame about stuff that they've done in their past. That it just kind of has continued the cycle of. Having that, that that shame just continued on from them to me, and even to some of my siblings. And
Are you
stuff.
still
So,
an active member in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
I am.
And did they help you throughout your addiction?
Yeah, so after talking to my parents, I talked to my dad after he came home from work as well. We went and talked to my bishop, and then from that day on until really, what was it, maybe a month ago or something like that, I've been talking to my bishop, and some bishops were more helpful than other bishops, but they always expressed love and made me feel like I'm not a bad person because I'm doing this. I'm just making a choice that needs to be changed.
When you say talking with your bishop, was that more along the lines of kind of a repentance process, or were you seeking kind of help and support to stay away from pornography, or all of the above?
All the above, yeah.
Yeah.
So, there were some I set goals with of like, well, what are you doing now that is maybe adding to making this harder in your life, kind of a thing. And looking back, I realize that pornography is just like any other addiction. It's just a symptom of something else that's going on in your life. And I emotionally was not handling my life well, and it went from being experimental and trying to understand what I was feeling and what sex was, versus then I was getting stressed, and it was my drug of choice, kind of thing.
And I think that's, if I understand what you're saying, that when you first found pornography and masturbation, you were in junior high school, and that's kind of the normal time when people are going through puberty and being interested and stimulated by those things for the first time. But as you got older, your use of pornography and masturbation became a way of dealing with stressors in your life. Is that what you're saying?
Stress, loneliness, boredom, being angry, or even just being tired.
So what were some of the things that you recall during your later adolescence and early adult life that you would say were triggers for that sort of stress and behavior?
I think a lot of it was feeling alone. I knew that my parents and siblings loved me, but I didn't really feel like I had very many close people I could really just go to and talk to about things. And so I wouldn't say I was a loner or anything like that, but just having someone I could really just open myself up to.
What was your social life and friendships? What were they like as a high school student?
Generally, it was, friend stuff was at school. I didn't have a lot of extracurricular activities. I went to dances, and I wasn't into sports, so I didn't go into the sports stuff. So, but I every once in a while went to a friend's house, but mostly just stayed home. And my brothers and I are really close to each other, and so we'd always just hang out and do our thing as a family kind of thing. So
You're listening to Project Recovery. More with Jason and Lauren coming up.
A gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's go back to the early years of your addiction. Was there ever a point when you said to yourself, hey, I might be doing this a little too much. There's something here. I might be addicted. Did you ever have that conversation with yourself? Or did you think it was normal?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that because, at first it was, going to the bishop and learning at a religious standpoint that this is wrong, not something I should be participating in. But seeing it as an addiction, it took some time. Probably wasn't until I think 2005 where I actually realized that this is an addiction.
So you first conceptualized it as, this is something I shouldn't do from a spiritual, religious standpoint. But it was, how old were you in 2005 when you started to realize this is out of my control?
21.
So you were a young adult by that point.
And how old are you now?
Right now I'm 35.
Mm-hmm. How about with your brothers? You mentioned that you're quite close with your brothers. Did this topic ever come up amongst you as siblings, talking about their experiences with it?
A couple times, but usually it was just a short thing. Nobody wanted to talk about it. I knew that we had struggled with it to varying degrees, each person. I'd probably say I struggled with it more than any of them. But it wasn't really talked about. I look back and I think about what a missed opportunity that was for all of us, where we could have gotten closer together and strengthened each other, supported each other to do better and check up on each other, say, how you doing, what's going on, kind of thing. And
because we've learned on this podcast, shame thrives in secrecy and darkness, and it really starts to grow. If you start to shine the light on it and open up a conversation, you can help dwindle the shame.
Oh, first of all, just like I think it sounds like you've realized through your process that you're not alone, and that these sorts of issues are very common, regardless of the type of addiction a person has. As soon as you shine the light on it and start talking about it, there is an element of relief and validation that comes knowing that I'm not alone in this process. It's still yours to deal with, but there's a lot of strength in numbers and talking about it. But I'm not too surprised that your family culture was not to talk much about it, because I think that's very common. There's a lot of shame associated with sex and sexuality. Do you feel like talking with your bishop and seeing that from a religious LDS standpoint that it was wrong to do you feel like that helped you want to work on it, or did that create some shame in your process?
It was both. I feel like it really helped me once I realized what I was doing was wrong. I definitely wanted to do better and make that change. But then I also felt that if I'm doing this, that makes me a bad person. And especially where, the LDS Church has spoken out so much against it.
Is that your perspective now, that a person who looks at pornography is a bad person?
No.
What's your perspective now?
My perspective is that if you're looking at pornography, that you're making I'll just say I'm making a bad choice, one that affects me and also my family and those around me, affects all aspects of my job when you're your life when you're in addiction. And it doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that there's some things I need to change in my life to be more balanced and be in a better place.
How long did it take you to make that kind of shift in your thinking? Because I think lots of people do feel like, looking at pornography, masturbating, having those sorts of tendencies, it makes them a bad person. And I think people struggle with that.
Yeah. It took quite a long time, like for ever since I found out to, I want to say about the time I started going to LifeStar that I realized that this doesn't make me a bad person. My wife Lauren had tried to tell me that multiple times, that it doesn't make you a bad person. Let's just try again.
We're going to talk about LifeStar in just a second, but you had mentioned your wife, and Lauren is here with you. In the previous podcast, we've had couples come in here and talk about their pornography addiction. And, one of the interesting parts is when the spouse finds out about the addiction. When did you find out about Jason's addiction, Lauren?
So I found out about it on our second date. Jason had felt that he wanted to get serious with me. I was his first girlfriend, so he felt like he wanted to be honest with me, which I appreciate. I come from a background, there's a lot of sexual addicts, a lot of infidelity, divorces, and how it was dealt with was the men in those relationships blamed it on their wives, or they didn't have a problem, their wife was just fat, or she wasn't a good wife. So meeting Jason, because I knew everybody's going to have something. So when Jason told me on the second date, I have this problem, I'm working on it, I was like, I can do this. I can fight something I can see. I don't want to get married or get in a relationship and have a surprise later. So it's funny because he was pretty sure I would be like, that's it, we're done. I'll never see you again.
I mean, that's a lot to unload on a second date, and you must have saw something special in her, but I can't imagine the thoughts running through your head going, I'm getting ready to tell her. And tell me about that moment.
Well, I remember we were sitting in the Baskin-Robbins in Layton, and we had gone to a show and went there for dessert, and I was just nervous the whole time, and just like, I feel like I need to tell you this because I care about you and I want this out in the open, and I don't want, to really bring this into our marriage. I'd like to get it done and taken care of. That was my mindset at the time, have it taken care of, like it wasn't going to stick
fixed
with me. Yeah, not the right mindset, but before we got married, and so I told her, and what floored me was I was expecting her to walk out and be done, but instead she says, well, that's okay. I appreciate you telling me, and I want you to know that I love you.
Wow. Right?
Yeah. Because I'm with you, Jason. I would have thought that I'd get the ice cream cone in the face and she's out the door of Baskin-Robbins. But it sounds like, Lauren, the fact that he was open and honest, that was refreshing to you based on your experience with people in your family. Yeah. And so I think that's impressive. And again, that illustrates the fact that when we're open and honest about the things that we hold shameful about ourselves, we most of the time, I think, find love and support, and it dilutes the power of it. So that shame is such a heavy, powerful weight that people carry around within them. And it's also a good way to weed out who you want to marry, I guess.
Yeah.
If she can handle that, she's marriage material.
Two things I found interesting is that Lauren said everybody's got something.
Yeah.
And I find that true. Everybody's got something.
Right.
And,
not Josh, but everyone else.
Most everyone's got something.
Yeah.
But the other thing, it takes me back to my time at Pinnacle, is that I've been carrying around this shameful thing for so long.
Yeah.
And it's in my backpack, and the longer I carry it, the bigger it gets. But I remember the time I finally, was ready to present this, everyone was like, that's it?
Yeah.
Because you've been building it up in your head. You've been thinking about this, and this has been weighing. You've been carrying it around for years. And when you finally bring it out into the open, somebody goes, oh.
There's a beautiful illustration of that in the book and movie Dr. Sleep that just came out recently, Stephen King's follow-up to The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
And Ewan McGregor plays a grown-up version of Danny from The Shining who has become an alcoholic. And he goes to AA, and he gets sober, but he holds a secret in back with a lot of shame and guilt for many years. And in the end, I won't spoil it, but in the end at his AA meeting, when he finally says his last secret, that's everyone's kind of response, like, oh, that was it. And you can it's a beautiful illustration of that moment of, like, if he'd have just let go of that a decade earlier, how much easier emotionally his life would have been. But he'd been holding on to that secret. And I think so many of us do that with small things and big things. And so I'm impressed, Jason, that you were willing in Baskin-Robbins on date number 2 to just kind of get that out in the open because you sensed that you wanted to have a future with this person. And that is a great example for any of us that are holding on to things that are guilt or shameful.
Now, before we get to Lifestar and find out a little more about that, in your addiction, before you told Lauren about your addiction and all that stuff, did you feel like it was monopolizing your time? You said you spent a lot of time at home, and in my head it seems like you might have been isolating. Do you think any of those two things are true? Or, I mean, were you planning your day around pornography and masturbation? Or how does that look like for some people out there who might not know?
I wouldn't say I was planning my day around it, but it did. At that time, early stages, it was almost an everyday occurrence. Usually after I came home from school, figuring I'm doing homework up in my room kind of thing. So even though I wasn't planning on it, it was kind of a routine kind of a thing. So I don't know. It's not like I premeditated it, I guess I would say, as far as planning it. But it did happen very frequently. There were some times where I was masturbating a couple times a day, and then I do think in some ways I was isolating, for sure.
Now, you grew up, you said you're 31 right now?
35.
35. Yeah. So was there a transition from, magazine to the computer, and did that throw you in for a whole new loop?
So the computer was in a public room in our house, so there wasn't a lot of opportunities to do that. Sometimes I would get on, like, Amazon, look at women in lingerie, while people were upstairs, and I could see when they were going to come down. And so I'd hurry up and switch it off, turn it off. And I at that time, I was still naive to the actual porn websites. But I ended up finding those later on, and then once I started doing that, then it changed more to, I guess I should just say, more destructive for me.
And I think that's something that makes common sense once we talk about it, that if you liken it to a different drug like alcohol or something like that, the access plays a big role in the course of the addiction. And so digital era, like you were mentioning, Casey, it was magazines or, a late night HBO show or something like that. Now it's like the Budweiser truck backed up to your house, and you have this never-ending supply of alcohol. If alcohol were your issue, instead of having to save your money, go out, find it, get it. Now it's like free beer all the time for an alcoholic. And that's the way pornography and the internet works, is you no longer have to pay for hardcore pornography. It's not, 1985 when you're looking through the JCPenney catalog at, black and white lingerie pictures, which was kind of a lot of people's experience growing up to satisfy that curiosity. Now it's a very serious issue where pornography is available 24/7 in a never-ending supply of all levels of pornography, from something that's mildly stimulating to hardcore pornography. And I think it's creating more of an addiction environment for people because of access. It's just always there on your phone. Your phone is basically a little computer you can take anywhere you want.
On this podcast, I define addiction as having something else have power over you. Now, whatever your thoughts on masturbation or pornography are, I'm not here to debate that. But what it sounds like is that, Jason, it had power over you.
Yeah.
And That's what we're talking about. And so, because some of the stuff he's talking about early on, in my head, I think, well, that sounds normal, but it escalated and moved to a point where it became not normal.
You've mentioned a couple times on the show today, Jason, like when I realized what I was doing, and I think that's a really authentic way of describing that early adolescent experience. It's all new, and you don't really know if it's right or wrong, good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. Yeah, the talk was a little late in your life.
It was a lot late.
Yeah, and by the way, parents, when you talk to kids, you need to talk about things like pornography. It's not just where babies come from. That's not sufficient. But because it went from curiosity to self-soothing. And so as I talk with people, I will tell you what my opinion is that we know that, sexual arousal and consequently masturbation has a normal place in adolescent development for both boys and girls. Now, boys' equipment works a little different than girls' equipment, and so boys tend to find masturbation more often and more frequently than girls do. But that part of it has a normal developmental course. And if it's normal and healthy, then a person doesn't learn to rely on the emotional and chemical release of masturbation to self-soothe when they're frustrated and, like you said, lonely, bored, and those sorts of things. And they can develop healthy sexual relationships with another person as they get older. When you throw pornography in the mix, now we can stimulate that experience on demand. And so pornography, in my opinion, is always an unhealthy experience for a person growing up. But masturbation has its normal developmental course. The issue is, and this is what happens a lot for boys because it's so easy to masturbate for a boy, it becomes a self-soothing mechanism. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel, believe it or not, lonely and boredom, like you mentioned, Jason, are two of the biggest ones that I hear as triggers for wanting to look at pornography and feel that self-soothing release of chemicals in your brain, and then masturbation and orgasm.
But there's an adrenaline factor to it, too.
Adrenaline's part of it. So it's very much a physiological experience. And a lot of men, unfortunately, started in their adolescence, instead of learning to solve their boredom issues in a way that actually cures the boredom, or dealing with frustration head on and developing the skills to make better friendships or be involved in things that reduce our frustration for real. They learn to kind of turn to pornography and masturbation, just like an alcoholic might feel frustrated and angry or depressed after a long day at work and go home and drink instead of figure out, how can I make my job better? How can I improve my relationship with my spouse? They go to that numbing of the alcohol, and that's a very, very similar, if not the same process with masturbation and pornography. The problem is, if that's the first way in adolescence that you really learn to deal with those things, it can become a very solidified skill set, so to speak, not a healthy skill set.
And it seems like porn addiction is still an addiction that is unknown, uncharted. I mean, for some reason, people are more likely to tell you that they're an alcoholic than they're addicted to porn. They'd rather be addicted to heroin than addicted. I mean, but I'm just saying.
In the public eye.
In the public eye, in the public persona of what it is, because it still seems to be like this uncharted area, but it seems porn addiction is a big deal, especially right here in the state of Utah.
It is. It's a big problem in the state of Utah, and it's a worldwide problem. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so regardless of what the product is, if you're making that much money, it's going to be flooding markets all over the world, whatever it is. Turn of the century it was opium, now it's pornography. It's flooding our markets, and it's free now. If I was back in the 80s and wanted to see some pornography, I probably would have had to ride my BMX bike across the valley and find somebody's creepy older brother who had a Playboy in the barn or something, right? Like, it just, by the time you get there, you're exhausted and you forget where you were going.
Yeah.
Right? But nowadays, it's just right there all the time. And so, yes, it's an epidemic, and we don't think of it that way. But I like the analogy of, if you had a problem with drinking and all of a sudden somebody just backed up a never-ending, Budweiser truck to your house for free, I mean, oh my gosh, how hard would that be to overcome the drinking problem?
Impossible.
Yeah, and I think we don't realize it, but our phones are essentially that when it comes to pornography.
On this podcast, we like to give you stuff that you can take back into your own relationships, into your own families. And you've said a couple of times to have that conversation when our kids are in a certain age. I'd like to know, what age would it be okay to kind of tell our kids what pornography is?
Way before you think. I would say if you have a kid who's 8 or 9 years old, or actually younger, if your child, most kids nowadays hit elementary school at age 6 and they're using the computers for schoolwork, and it's very efficient and great in a lot of ways. But that's the time you need to start talking to them about what's healthy content to look at, what's unhealthy. When they're that young and they're way before puberty, they'll say, "Oh, that's gross. Ew, I don't." But you talk to them and you say, "It makes you feel uncomfortable, but we need to talk about it. Please come talk to me. Let me know if you've come across that. It's okay to talk to mom or dad about this issue." So, believe it or not, probably the conversation about identifying what is pornography and to talk to your parents about it starts way younger than maybe you need to have the maturation conversation in 5th grade. In fact, you should have it before then nowadays. But, so any kid who's on a device should probably know.
Which are most kids, and on a device, you're one click away from a whole world
of inappropriate and confusing and upsetting things for children. It's also important to have age-appropriate conversations. So, you can use more general terms with a 5 or 6 year old about, the pornography, and then much more specific terms as they get older.
And, it sounds like an open line of communication.
That's the key. I would say when you and I grew up, Casey, parents might have been able to get away with saying, if my kid sees pornography. Maybe. But nowadays, it's when. They will see pornography in all various forms. I would say a Victoria's Secret commercial on TV nowadays would have been considered pornographic in the early 80s. What we tolerate sexual content-wise in TV ads, just general media, social media, YouTube, all these sorts of outlets. And so it's important to if you can't have a conversation about it with your kids, then they're going to figure it out on their own elsewhere. And we don't want to send our kids off on their own doing that.
You've just heard part 1. Click on over to part 2 of Project Recovery.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.